Okay, so we're going live in three, two, one. Well, happy Friday, everyone. My name is Edwin Hahn, and I'm your host of a series called Our Story, where we connect our community one story at a time. We do thank you for joining us today. We've got a very special guest online. His name is Kawar Farok, and he is a community activist. He's a member of the Kurdish community here in Moorhead, Fargo, and we're going to welcome him very warmly. Welcome, Kawar.
Hey man, thank you so much for having me on. It's a pleasure. Looking forward to our conversation we're going to have today. So thank you.
Yes, thank you, Kawar. It is very interesting, your story, and thank you for taking some time out of your day to share your story with our story. So just open up the dialogue a little bit. Well, I'm just kind of
Sure.
really curious about how and where and when you were born and what your life experience has been starting from the very beginning. Have you share a little bit? Thank you, Kawar.
All right, let's dig through the memory files in my brain, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So at the beginning, when I was born in a refugee camp in Turkey. It was called Merdin. And the way we got there was Saddam was doing his Enfal campaign. It's a campaign of genocide of the Kurds. And Saddam Hussein was the president of Iraq. So what was happening is he was using chemical gases. In 1988, he used chemical gases on a town of Halabja. And from there, he used chemical gases through a couple of different areas of Kurdistan. So we got word that they were going to chemical gas our village that we were at. So my grandfather and everybody else told my parents to leave, to start venturing north to Turkey. So what happened then was the day after, one man was left behind. My grandfather stayed back to wait for him to come back from hunting. The village was gassed. So my grandfather survived for a little bit. We went to the camp. He made it to the camp. I was born in 1989. And then my grandfather actually died of chemical gases not much longer after that. My family was in the camp in Turkey for 4 years as a UN refugee camp. And I wanted our viewers to understand that when people seek refuge in America, it's called refuge. A refugee, which is somebody that flees from persecution, not under their own accord or willingly leaves the country. It's because they're a threat to their life. And so we had a decision. My uncle was one of the people that wrote the names down for people to come to America. And he had a list from the UN and a list from America. So he wrote down people's names and actually kept ours off that list for a while. And my mom, in that time frame, in Middle Eastern women played a different role. Middle Eastern women played the household role, kind of like America a long time ago. They played that household role. The man made the decisions, and the woman was just there to support the man's decisions. But my mom made a very critical decision. My grandfather didn't want my father coming to America, and wanted him to stay back because he was the worker of the family, one of the ones that brought in the work. And so my mom at that point wanted a better life for her kids, and told my father, took the decision to tell my father that, I'm going to go and take my kids. I would love for you to come, but I know it's the best decision for us as a family and for my kids to have a better future in America, the land of the free, the home of the brave. And so that's where it started. I mean, it all started where we were born in a refugee camp. Me and my brother, me and my brother. And we ventured our way to America. I have 5 brothers and 1 sister.
Wow. So that was a lot of information there, and it's very, very interesting. And I want to just zoom in a little bit about some of the things you talked about and really highlight it and dig in a little bit to understand. So your family was under the threat of being gassed and being killed in kind of a form of genocide, extermination.
Correct.
through chemical warfare in where you were born in the home country, and you ended up displaced in a refugee camp in Turkey. So you had to actually leave kind of your homeland and go into Turkey, and then your mother faced this incredible decision, a very tearing type of decision to leave your father and your family to seek freedom, to seek the refuge in the United States. And I'm just kind of drawing this out because I think that for those of us who have been born and raised in the United States of America, we've never experienced this kind of persecution or this kind of, very much a torturous, difficult, extreme, painful, not comfortable life. And we're very comfortable here in the U.S. So I just want to highlight that for the viewers to help maybe draw out some more of your frame and your reference and where you're coming from. So
yeah, absolutely. I mean, I can dig in even more. I was trying to just skim it a little bit because I want to push the show forward for you to hear and talk about the crucial topics. But just to go back a little bit, my cousin actually died of typhoid in the camps. There was storms and winds, and we weren't supplied like the way that it was today. I mean, a lot of refugee camps you see today, they have AC units, they have TVs, they have a lot of different things where that wasn't provided in 1988, in 1989, and 1990. Those things weren't provided. My cousin died of typhoid. My dad fell very, very ill of typhoid and almost passed away as well. I mean, my father and everybody's here now, but a lot of things happened. I mean, they were given poisonous bread in the camp. The country we were being sought refuge in actually gave the people there poisoned bread. A lot of people died. And this is a country you went to go seek refuge in until you were able to go back to your homeland, or until a country or the UN was willing to bring you on to their country, respective countries. So these things happened. And my older brother, he remembers a soldier that was supposed to keep people in the camps, not let them go out of the camps, put a gun to his head with an empty chamber and clicked it. I mean, my brother right now is about 38, 39 years old, and he still remembers that. I mean, as a 7, 8-year-old, he still remembers the terrifying fact that somebody puts a gun to your head. And when you're grown up being a Kurd, you understand what a gun's for. I mean, a gun's for killing. In America, you might think that a gun's for hunting, a gun's for protection. But in the Middle East, a gun is to exterminate somebody, to kill one.
Exactly.
It's not for anything else. So, exactly. I mean, all those traumatic events in this 4-year span, I mean, I could even go farther into detail to tell you different things that happened, but just to highlight some of the important parts, that refugee camp isn't all roses. I mean, there's a lot of difficulty in living in a refugee camp, seeking employment. I mean, you have to live in a camp and have no employment, Edwin. You have to find a way to feed your family, and you're at the mercy of the country that you're a refugee in. Whether they allow you to go out, don't allow you to go out, whether you go work for $1 a day, or you come back and work for pennies. So I mean, the country we were in, they allowed the people to leave the camp for work, strictly for work purposes, and they were brought right back in right after that.
So it actually sounds. I mean, this sounds very difficult. Very. It sounds like a concentration camp in a lot of ways, where you're a prisoner. You're not actually there freely. You're just. It seems to be though you were in prison. And that's what your brother went through was very traumatic. Under the threat, the fear of being shot in the head as a 7-year-old. So this just to kind of carry on, but we'll just to highlight what it was like in the Turkish refugee camp and how difficult life was, and how very, very, maybe in a sense inhumane that you were treated. So you've came to the U.S. now, and you've grown up. You're an adult. You've experienced a lot of life, and you've still carry what you experienced as a child and everything outside of the U.S. But now you're in the U.S. and you've been here for quite a while. What are your thoughts about what's going on today? What are your thoughts about the current state of the culture and the nation? And just share a little bit more about what you're seeing.
I don't want to, I would love to talk about COVID. I would love to talk about different subjects of today, but I don't want to do an injustice to the Black Americans that are in America right now, that what they have been facing and what they have faced. And so the reason why I shared that story with you about the oppression that Kurds have faced and the Kurds still face to this day. I mean, Iran to this day still hangs 16, 15-year-old Kurds for being an enemy of God. The last time I checked, nobody can judge who's an enemy of God besides God himself. So what I see today, I mean, you look at and a lot of things I'm going to say today that some people might not agree with. Some people think, quote unquote, might think I'm stirring the pot, and I don't mean to. And before I even start talking about the topic, I want to say one thing right away. I do not condone looting or rioting in any shape or form, and I never have. Your right to protest is your right to protest. You can go out and say whatever you want. But unfortunately, we're seeing different things happening that are causing the riots and protests that nobody wants, the riots and looting that nobody wants to talk about. Videos have aired, and you don't know what to believe anymore, Edwin. You don't know what video is photoshopped or something's changed in it, or you don't know what video is legitimate. But we have seen videos. I mean, John Bone Jones is a UFC fighter. A video of his leaked really recently of him taking two spray cans away from two boys of non-color. They weren't black. They weren't foreign. He took two spray cans away from these folks. And in a different situation, I saw another video of a black woman yelling at two ladies, again, of non-color, and telling them to stop painting BLM movement on their buildings, on their own colleagues' buildings, or wherever the city people live in. Because at the end of the day, when you're looting and rioting, if you're doing it to your own city, it doesn't make sense. I mean, you're destroying your own city that you're in. So again, I don't think that people that are the organizers of the BLM movement, I don't think they're part of the looting or rioting at all. I think that's exterior forces that are coming in or brought in to cause chaos. But just to go back to the beginning, because I think a lot of people, Edwin, don't understand the level of frustration that the Black Americans have today. And it's not built just because of this one shooting. It's not built because of the other shooting. It's centuries and centuries of buildup. I mean, first and foremost, again, I'm going to warn people that people are going to not like what I have to say, some folks. But one thing I'll tell you is imagine being ripped away from your country, whether you're part of a tribe or whatever you may be part of, ripped away from your country, put on a boat, half of your people die, if not more than half of your people die, being brought over to a different foreign country, being forced to believe in a religion. And a lot of people of them have adapted that religion to today. I mean, a lot of them willingly have adapted the religion. But again, being brought on, ripped away from your country, given a religion, people telling you what you can and cannot do. You're forced to work labor. Your wife's taken away from you. Your daughter is raped. And your babies are sold and ripped away from others' hands. And then on top of that, we go into the future. I mean, we have the peaceful protests. We have the Martin Luther King Jr.'s, the Malcolm X's of the world. I've seen a lot of people post like, why aren't they protesting peacefully like Martin Luther King Jr. did? Well, Martin Luther King Jr. was still assassinated. Regardless if he protested peacefully or not, he was still killed. And that's one thing that people, I think, it shocks me that people don't remember that he was still killed.
So and the peaceful protests were still met with violence, I think is what you're trying to say. In the end, there was still a violent result. And there was quite a lot going on in that season as well. And there was other, we'll say violent protests that were happening as well. And there was armed resistance, and there was a lot of other force that was being applied on both sides. But just so you're empathetic. You're seeing from your perspective, coming from really from a childhood experience of oppression, of concentration camp, fear of death, malnutrition, kind of very poor experience, and then coming into the U.S. and in the generation you're in now, seeing the perspective, and then also looking back through history. but if you contrast your childhood experience of being in the refugee camps in Turkey, and you contrast that to what you've been living your life as in the United States, would you say that we are a free country? How do you compare the two? Go ahead.
That's a very tough question to answer, because if I could compare it based on the country I come from, it's leaps and bounds ahead of many countries in the world. And I think it's one of the leaders in democracy and freedom. But that doesn't mean that we can settle and say, okay, well, we're in the lead, so we're going to stop here, or we don't have to advance further in that. I feel like we are one of the best countries in the world. I really do. I love being an American. The one thing, though, go on that, the one thing, though, that you realize is that I'm called Kurdish American, right? And that's just a label I'm given. It's because I'm Kurdish, and I'm from Kurdish heritage, and I'm an American citizen, so I'm a Kurdish American. Why don't they, I'm not trying to get into the whole race thing, because I don't want to, but why don't they call African Americans, Black people, African American, right? And they call them Hispanic Americans, but why don't they call people of non-color German American, Norwegian American? Why is it that we're only labeled? I mean, when I became an American, Edwin, I gave up that part of myself. I am an American. No hyphen needed. I am an American. But people feel like they still need to put hyphens on us, because it's not what we think. I mean, I don't think it's 100% we're all on the same level. I watched a video the other day, Edwin, and it showed a privilege, right? I don't mean to scatter my conversation, but it showed privilege. And it was all kids of all colors lined up in the same line. And I don't know, I'm sure you've seen it too. And they talk about different things that gives you privilege. And one of them was, if you were raised with a mom and dad, step forward. So these people started getting a head start, because they said, if your dad left, or if your dad was imprisoned, or if your dad was killed, please step forward. A lot of these kids were 2 feet away from the finish line, where a majority of the kids were in the back of the line because they had none of those advantages. Now, when I talk to my friends about the whole things that's happening right now, the George Floyd thing, the Ahmaud Arbery thing, the many shootings of unarmed Black men, a lot of people come back at me with, hey, Kawar, but white people are killed too. I agree. I'm not trying to say, or I'm not trying to bring that down, that white people aren't killed by police. I think that everybody is killed. But if you think about the percentage of Black Americans we have in America, is a very, very small percentage based on the percentage of non-Black Americans we have in America. So at the alarming rate they're being killed, that's the alarming thing, is that they're smaller, much smaller percentage, and they're killed at an alarming rate. So as far as your question, as far as, do I feel like I'm free? Yeah. I mean, I have my house, I have a car, I can leave my house without fearing for my life, because my skin is a shade lighter than Black. I'm just saying, like, there is certain things to freedom. I mean, yeah, of course we can speak whatever we want, but at the same token, you say what you want, but people tell you to close your mouth because you're stirring the pot, right? So can you really say what you want? I'm not sure, because I've gotten a phone call that somebody told me, you're stirring the damn pot, won't you shut your mouth? I mean, I got that specific phone call from a friend of mine that's a Caucasian American, and told me, you're stirring the pot, shut your mouth. So
it's an interesting situation that you just described, because I'm a big believer in freedom, and I've talked a little bit about oppression and force and control and violence, and if we do the little logical connect the dots, we've got force is an attempt to control, which is really oppression. And of course, violence and force, they go together. But we can force people in different ways. We can put force on people through fear, intimidation, right? It sounds like maybe you got a call that was either an angry friend or a threatening, in a way. It's like, hey, don't do this because there might be consequences or what have you. But it sounded like fear was being used as a tactic, which I think is a form of control, and then, of course, is a form of oppression. So I think what I'm a huge fan of free speech. I'm a big believer in the United States Constitution, and I think that we've talked about patience and dialogue and how we've seemed to have lost some of our ability to have dialogue. Just like this, just hey, listen to the other side, create a space where we can have a conversation about some different things and respect a difference of opinion, but dialogue about it. In fact, the founding fathers, this was a core value of how this republic, this democracy was going to operate. It had to. The only way it was going to function is through dialogue and through a debate, a discussion. And so, to shut the debate down and silence a voice is a form of violence, in a sense, a form of force, control, and oppression. So, in any event, I would like to believe that we can open our eyes and our ears and have discourse, have conversation in a respectful way that could be peaceful, even though we do disagree. And of course, there's gonna be times where people get very inflamed, and but to be able to come back to the table, because we are one country. We are united in the sense we're physically united in one continent, and the fact is that we will operate much better. I believe that we would operate much better, and we will have a much better way of life if we can at least come to the table and not be so divided. But let me pass it back up to you, Kawar, and I know you were going somewhere with kind of being silenced by your friend, so go ahead.
So, I mean, exactly your point, right? The dialogue part. So I don't succumb to fear. From the oppression we've come from, you don't really succumb to fear after a while, right? It's kind of like you're null to it. So I did. What I told my friend was that, are you trying to shut me up because the Constitution says I have a voice? The Constitution says I have freedom of speech. The Constitution says I can express myself freely. And I started to have dialogue with this friend, and I started to tell him the same things I'm telling you, where a lot of these people come from. A lot of these people think that what the Black movement's doing is saying we hate all police officers, and I can't speak on behalf of the Black Lives Matter movement, or on behalf of any of my Black friends, but I can tell you that they're not spewing out hate for police. They're trying to get justice for what happens to them, and they want equal opportunity at being looked at by a police officer without being racially profiled as a rapist, killer, or murderer. I mean, that's just what they want. I mean, Edwin, it's gone to the point, Edwin, systematically, we're trained things, right? I mean, our society teaches us certain things that maybe we're not even aware that it's teaching us, but subconsciously it's being taught to us. I mean, if you walk through an alley, Edwin, and you saw a gentleman with a shirt and jeans, right? There was two alleys you could walk down. One alley was a Caucasian American walking down the alley. It's shirt and jeans. And the other alley was a Black man, shirt and jeans. Society tells you the safer option is the Caucasian American. Regardless what your opinion is on that, society tells you the safer option is to walk down the alley with the Caucasian American. And the reason is because we're taught that. It's not because and the media has a huge role in that, Edwin. And I really think that media has a huge role in the rioting and looting. It's because George Floyd was killed by a police officer on duty. Am I trying to say that all police officers are bad? Absolutely not. I mean, we have the 1% of people that commit fraud in banking that ruin it for the 99%. We have the same ratios in the police force. We have the 1% of the bad police officers that ruin it for the 99% of good police officers. So I'm not trying to say that the police officers are bad. No, absolutely not. And nor am I saying that people should be trying to harm a police officer at a protest, because they're just there to keep order, to make sure that nothing goes haywire and that nobody gets hurt, even within the protest itself. So with my friend, the gentleman that called me and told me, you need to shut your mouth. What are you doing? Go join the protest, go join the rioters. And I told the person what my goal was with my posts wasn't to spew hate, it was merely to put light on a subject that has a shadow on it, put light on a subject that has darkness cast on it. because everybody, when the rioting and the looting of the buildings was happening and the burning of the buildings in Minneapolis was happening, what everybody that was against the movement tried to do so hard was to divert attention from the murder to the buildings. That was the number one goal. And it was not their fault that they decided to do that. It's the media's fault. The media, the different platforms in media, whatever side it falls on the aisle, try to put it on two different sides. So we politicize every single movement, Edwin. And I don't think that's just. I don't think that people are looking to politicize their movements. I don't think the Black Lives Matter movement is looking for the Democrats to say, hey, we got your back. We're going to be the ones that push reform, or vice versa. The Republicans shouldn't be on the other aisle saying, hey, we're going to be the ones that stand against this. It shouldn't work that way. We shouldn't politicize these movements. These folks are just looking to have equal opportunity when they're being pulled over or looked at by a police officer. That's all they're looking for.
So equal opportunity is what Kawar is seeing. It sounds like, Kawar, you are asking for. It sounds like you are very empathetic. You've because of your upbringing and what you experienced as a youth and the persecution and oppression you experienced as a youth, you've been able to put yourself in the shoes of another person that has experienced oppression in this country or that has experienced some injustice in this country. And I think what I'm hearing today is that you're speaking on their behalf and you're speaking out because you yourself as a youth saw the atrocities that oppression can bring. Is that what's kind of what I'm hearing?
Again, I don't want to speak on behalf of anyone because I at this point I speak on behalf of myself and my own opinions and thoughts. But if it gets some people to start having dialogue, I hope people take my conversation the right way and don't scrutinize it for the other things that I said because of the fact that they want to spin my words to their agenda. What I'm trying to just say is that we do have racism. And if people are blind to that, that's okay. Because the fact that you've probably never experienced it. If you've never experienced racism, then I guess you can be blind to it. But it's there. It happens. I mean, even systematically, look at the employment field in the Midwest, specifically Minnesota, North Dakota. I mean, I'm not talking about southern Minnesota because it's a very liberal area, and it's a lot of diversity in the workforce. If you look at a lot of the companies, even Moorhead, Fargo, those areas, let's say 10 executives in Fargo, Moorhead that didn't create their own company. It's somebody else's company, and they're a person of color, whether it's woman or man, person of color that's executive at a company. Give me 10. I mean, not their own started companies, because that's what people have done. People have created their own companies because they can't get high enough at a certain company. In the Midwest, we have this ideology that, and again, I'm no expert in this field, but in the Midwest, we have this ideology that diversity is adding women to the field. Yes, women are a massive part of the diversity part, but why does it always have to be a Caucasian woman that's added to it? Why can't it be a woman, a Hispanic woman, a Black woman, of different descent? It doesn't have to be that way. I mean, diversity comes from all shapes and different sizes. I mean, the word diverse means is so you can relate to other people because you understand where they're coming from, right? So when you have a company that's run by all Caucasians, men and women, but say when you ask where the diversity is, you say, well, we have women as employees and our executives. That's not diversity. I mean, that is diversity to a certain degree because you're putting women and men in the same field, but you don't have any people of color on your executive as executives. So racism exists. It doesn't have to be blatant. It doesn't have to be somebody calling you a derogatory word, to a stereotypical word. It doesn't have to be that. It doesn't have to say whites only on a restaurant door to say there's racism. It doesn't have to be that. There's many forms of racism. And what people are seeing is that Will Smith had a great quote. He said, racism never died. It's just being filmed. So, I mean, and I stand by. I mean, it's a great quote. I mean, that's what's happening is that people just think about, Edwin, how many unarmed Black people have been killed without video? And I'm talking about, before 2005, before 2000, where the smartphones came around. I'm talking about how many of them were killed, and the stories were all twisted up to make themselves guilt free.
Well, thank you, Kawar. I mean, there's a tremendous amount of information there, and again, this is a platform, an opportunity for you to come on and speak your voice and share your story. And I very much appreciate your point of view and where you're coming from and all of this. And we just have a couple minutes left. I want to give you an opportunity to kind of wrap up and have one message for the community that you feel is the most important right now. Go ahead.
Edwin, I feel like we all are human beings. At the end of the day, we all bleed the same color. It's red. Regardless if you're white, black, yellow, brown, doesn't matter. We all bleed the same color. And I think that's what's the most important thing. I think that people should be kind to one another regardless. And I hope this doesn't create a divide. I hope we can come together and become stronger. There is no right side or wrong side. There is just a human side. And we're all just trying to live peacefully and have the same opportunity that everybody else does, whether it's economical benefit, whether it's being able to be looked at in the right way and not prejudged before the people even meet you, which happened to me several times. But I think that, if we all hold hand in hand and fight this together, I think we're going to come out better than ever.
Thank you, Kawar. From Kawar Farok, there is no right side or wrong side, just the human side. Well, thank you, Kawar, for your time, for sharing your story on Our Story. And we look forward to having you come on again sometime soon. But we're out of time right now. But we do thank you so much, Kawar.
All right. Thanks you so much.
If you like this content, go ahead and click the like button and subscribe below. Again, my name is Edwin Hahn, your host of Our Story, where we connect our community one story at a time. We'd love to have you as a guest here on the show. Please send me an email to edwin@edwin4house@gmail.com. That's edwin4house@gmail.com. We look forward to seeing you again soon. Have a great weekend.